So one of the main topics we discussed last night on the podcast was Carlos Takam versus Anthony Joshua, a fight that has been made unexpectedly after Kubrat Pulev withdrew from the initially made mandatory fight for Joshua's IBF belt. Now, obviously on the podcast, lots of people talking, lots of topics to discuss. I wanted to do a separate video where I gave you my personal thoughts in a little bit more detail. Let me start by saying, given the circumstances, I believe Carlos Takam is a very, very, very good fight. You know, at 2 weeks' notice, it's a credit to Eddie Hearn to bring in a guy like Carlos Takam, and it was a very shrewd bit of business from him to have Carlos Takam on some sort of retainer deal whereby Takam would box on the Monaco bill, and you know, if something were to go wrong with Joshua's original opponent, he'd be ready to step up. It's a shrewd bit of business from Eddie Hearn. It saved him a lot of money by meaning a huge event continues, and you know, presumably Carlos Takam is delighted. He's going to earn probably twice as much money from this fight as he's earned in his entire career to date. So everyone's a winner here. My personal perspective is there will be very few people who've bought tickets who will want a refund. There'll be very few people who are going to buy the pay-per-view who will now no longer be buying the pay-per-view. The truth is, whilst Joshua Pulev was a solid fight in terms of the rankings, you know, Pulev was a highly ranked heavyweight, no one I'm aware of was really picking Joshua to lose that fight. So I don't think any of us necessarily expected that to be a blood and guts war. Any of us expected that necessarily to be a 50-50 fight. So in steps Carlos Takam. Is Carlos Takam a substantial underdog against Anthony Joshua? Yes, but that's kind of what we were geared up for already en route to this fight. So let me start by saying, I mean, we're not going to rank the heavyweight top 10 in this video, but, you know, Kubrat Pulev's pulled out of the fight, right? So who are Joshua's top options to fight in the heavyweight division for this fight? Now, obviously, Takam was the mandatory because the IBF rankings went down and he was the next highest ranked available contender. But let's even put that to a side. Yeah, let's be realistic. On 2 weeks' notice, you're not going to get a unification. It's not going to be a Deontay Wilder or a Joseph Parker. You know, you've got guys like David Haye and Tony Bellew who are already tied up in a fight together. You've got Luis Ortiz, who certainly has some controversy attached to him and potentially is banned. You've got Alexander Povetkin, who's got a fight booked, but yet again has some controversy attached to him. My point is, like, if you look at actually available contenders who could have taken this fight, obviously Stiverne is likely tied up with Deontay Wilder. He's already fought Brazil. You know, is there actually anyone who would have been available who'd have been a better fight than Carlos Takam? Maybe Bryant Jennings, but you know, they're much of a muchness at that sort of a level. So not only was Carlos Takam the mandatory challenger, he was pretty much the best available heavyweight. You know, maybe there's one or two people I've missed, but let's say Carlos Takam was one of the best available heavyweights who would have even been there to step up and take this fight. So, you know, I don't hate on this fight whatsoever. I actually think that whilst Carlos Takam isn't the greatest heavyweight in the world, he actually has the potential to ask some questions of Anthony Joshua. Now, what I'll say by that is we kind of know where Takam's at. We know he's a solid guy. He beat Tony Thompson. He drew with Mike Perez. We also know his limitations. You know, we know what happened when he fought Alexander Povetkin. We know what happened when he fought Joseph Parker. Both of those fights, by the way, he lost, but he lost in a highly respectable fashion. You know, he lost to Joseph Parker in a fight where he won at least 5 rounds of that fight. He lost to Alexander Povetkin in a fight where he won 4 or 5 rounds in that fight. So, you know, he's acquitted himself well, and he's acquitted himself respectfully against Povetkin and Parker, who most would consider top 5 heavyweights. And he's kind of proven that he's there or thereabouts by beating Tony Thompson and Mike Perez. So for me, Carlos Takam on the cusp of remaining a top 10 heavyweight and fairly solid in the context of today's heavyweight division. He's a small guy, he's durable, his knockout ratio suggests that he's got a decent amount of power. Having seen him fight at a higher level, I don't think he's too much of a puncher. But what Takam is he's strong, he fights small. And I think that's interesting. And I mentioned this on the podcast, you know, a lot of guys are going to be shorter than Anthony Joshua. Someone who's a hell of a lot shorter can potentially use that to their advantage. Someone like Carlos Takam is the kind of guy who's going to tuck up, he's going to get low, he's going to put his head down, and he's going to come forward. Don't get me wrong, he's no Joe Frazier. He's not the most sophisticated fighter in the world, but he is someone who, for me, can bring that pressure style. And that's a style I, with my eyes, don't believe we've seen Joshua face in the professional ranks so far. We haven't really seen someone take the fight to Anthony Joshua on the inside. We haven't really seen someone put their head on Anthony Joshua's chest and work away inside the pocket, banking punches to the body. We haven't really seen the fighter who's tried to walk Joshua down with that kind of style. I actually think stylistically he poses new threats to Anthony Joshua that Kubrat Pulev did not. Kubrat Pulev, a better fighter than Takam. I'd pick Kubrat Pulev to beat Takam. But in Kubrat Pulev, realistically, in my opinion, he's a poor man's Vladimir Klitschko. He is a lesser fighter, a lesser version of the same fighter that Joshua beat last time out. Now, Carlos Takam may not be the same technician Pulev is, but he actually will ask different questions, etc. So I think that's a potential interest here. And with Joshua's tendency to, gas at times in fights, a guy like Takam, who's so relentless, so high output, so continuously come forward, is the kind of guy who could feasibly ask questions. Now look, does he have the technique, does he have the size, does he have the power to cause Joshua problems? Probably not. And you're not going to hear me picking an upset in this fight, don't get me mistaken. But what I am saying is, I am actually intrigued to see how Joshua will deal with someone who tries to get him on the inside and tries to grind him down. It'd be interesting to see how he comes through that test. Now, potentially, he comes through that test by keeping Takam at range on the end of his long-range work and blows him out of there in a couple of rounds. Jay on my podcast was saying he thinks it's an early finish. That would be impressive because Takam has gone late with champions like Parker and Povetkin. So that would be impressive if Joshua does that. I think Takam won't have enough to beat Joshua, but I think he will ask him some questions. Now, a key feature in this fight for me is the notice. Eddie Hearn is very much spinning you the line that Takam's had 7 weeks notice, he's been in full camp, he's been on standby. I'm sure that's true to an extent, but at the same time, I'm realistic. Carlos Takam is in camp, on standby, penciled in to fight a TBA opponent on a Monaco belt. Now, that does not mean he's going to be in World Championship style training necessarily. And whilst he's happy to take the fight, whilst he's certainly going to be in some kind of shape, I don't believe saying he's on 7 weeks notice is equivalent to saying he's been in camp for 7 weeks preparing to fight Anthony Joshua. So what kind of shape Carlos Takam turns up in, how ready he is for a guy like Anthony Joshua, I think is an open question. Having said that, Joshua has spent his entire camp preparing to fight a tall, upright guy who boxes long behind a jab. He's had guys like Robert Elenius in for sparring for precisely that purpose. He's now fighting a short guy who's going to look to come forward and who's going to look to rough him up and take away his space. So, whilst there's a negative there from Takam, you could also spin a line that there's a negative there from Joshua's preparation. I think one of the key tests in this fight will be Joshua's control of distance. If he can keep Carlos Takam on the outside and lead Carlos Takam onto that straight 1-2 or the straight cross down the centre as Takam comes forward, it's a very, very easy night's work for Anthony Joshua. But if Takam comes in shape, and if Takam is quick on his feet, gets low, makes Joshua miss, comes inside and is able to start applying pressure, then we'll see some tests. Then we will see some sort of tests, the likes of which we haven't seen stylistically in Joshua's career before. Now, we know that good fighters come through the test of Carlos Takam, but as I say, he took 4 or 5 rounds off Parker and probably the same off Povetkin. So we've never seen anyone really do that against Anthony Joshua other than maybe Vladimir Klitschko. So I don't hate on this fight. I'm glad it's being made, given the lack of time. I was one of those who wasn't tremendously excited for the Kubrat Pulev fight regardless, if I'm being honest. So, I think this is much of a muchness. And I actually think there's a potential that whilst Takam, I would admit, is a lower ranked heavyweight than Pulev, there is potential for more questions to be answered here. We'll do another video. We'll come up with a method of victory. We'll come up with a prediction on rounds, if assuming we're going Joshua stoppage closer to the time. Between now and then, I will endeavour to, of course, watch some more Carlos Takam. But I wanted to do a video to put down some initial thoughts on this fight. And yeah, let me know your take on it, guys. Drop me a comment in the section below on anything I've said in this video. What do you make of this fight? If you've enjoyed the content, do take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so before, please subscribe. Thanks for tuning in as always. Appreciate you guys watching.